we're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to what is sure to be a spirited conversation with my friend, colleague, fellow LinkedIn author, Ian Barkin. So, what prompted the discussion today is that Ian and I both, Ian certainly, but myself also talking about aspects of automation, putting things into production, talking about, on the machine learning side, talking about the depressingly low percent of projects that make it into production, that get deployed. Ian has been working in the area of RPA for many years. So what's fascinating about this is although we both talk about deployment, production, automation with some frequency, there's also some differences between our fields. We certainly run into each other whenever we can, but we are both on the conference circuit, and perhaps surprisingly, we don't run into each other on the conference circuit all that much because there's completely different conferences for our two different areas. So we like it ill-structured. We like your questions. We're going to start with the simplest thing we can, which is what is automation? Then we'll start to talk about the differences between our two areas. So Ian, welcome. Thanks so much for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keith.
You start.
Cool. Yeah, all of the cool conferences we go to. I think yours might be cooler than mine, but you were correct.
Yeah.
And we've had fascinating discussions that really have articulated for me just the sort of the fiefdoms and the siloed isolation in large enterprises, specifically in which innovation occurs almost blind to itself, where there are teams that are experts in sort of more of the operational mundane, which was my stomping ground, and all the way up to the more sometimes esoteric, but certainly more analytical and complex data side of things, where you hang out with all of your cool data science friends. So what are we doing? We're kicking off with what is automation?
I think so, but I can't resist making a quick comment about how cool each other's conferences are. If I'm not mistaken, you go to Milan once a year.
I do. Although this stay tuned. Later on this year, that conference is most likely moving to Barcelona. So.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah, I know.
Clearly, that conference is going downhill.
Right. Exactly.
Who wants to go to Barcelona? Also, I want to welcome some folks that are joining us. Charles is joining us from North Carolina. Welcome, Charles. A number of other folks have said hi. It's always fun to know where you're joining from, or whether you mostly know me, or you know Ian, or you know both, or what area you're in. So we love seeing your comments. Yeah, so I think, Ian, starting with what is automation, we were just chatting about that before we went live. I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, this goes back 10, 15 years when I was on the speaking circuit, and you were talking to enterprises about just what this stuff is. And I always found it helpful to frame it in the fact that it's, there's very little that's new under the sun, and especially within enterprises, within humanity, automation has been something that we have harnessed since the beginning. Our ingenuity and creativity look to use tools, physical initially, and then virtual eventually, to augment and enable us to do more than what we could do with just ourselves. So that's everything from, I used to say we've been automating since the wheel, and I had a really cool image of a big stone wheel behind me. But then fast forward to current times, and the degree to which software automation has taken up a significant role within enterprises, whether it be the robotic process automation, routine, mundane, transactional tasks that software does of effectively executing, being our fingers, to the more complex. Automation is the application of whatever tool set we have available to us at the time to emulate some of the things that we're doing, to augment us and thereby supercharge us to do more than what we're just alone capable of doing.
Yeah, it's really, I often say, particularly when I'm thinking in terms of things like propensity scores, like here's a very high risk of fraud's got to be investigated. This is a tiny risk of fraud. It's not a high priority, right? It's really ultimately a time management tool, or shifting tasks or subtasks. We were just chatting about this a few minutes ago too, basically from human to machine. And you mentioned, even a dishwasher, would count. And I countered with what I anticipate is a YouTube video in the making. These washer dryer combos, folks can debate whether they like them better than the separate units, but I'm sure we spent a lot of our career with something like we've automated the washing step. Now a human has to move it from washer to dryer, and scheduling that, deciding who the human should be, coordinating that, and avoiding those bottlenecks is a huge part of what I do, because folks forget that when you're introducing a machine learning model, it's not like humans stop working. It's routing, it's triage, right? There's constant back and forth. And if there's too many points of coordination, it can really make it cumbersome. So you have to be thoughtful about that from the very beginning. So am I guessing right that that's frequently an issue for you, is what's the automated step, what's the human step, and how to efficiently go back and forth?
Yes, no, absolutely. I love the washer dryer thing. This office hour is brought to you by Whirlpool, makers of fine washer and dryer.
We didn't get an advertiser. That
Can
was,
we? Yeah, I'm trying to
only we got the idea earlier.
drum up some sponsorship, man. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's just highlight everything that we can think of that might sponsor this. No, and ultimately, again, this is the two different domains and areas we hang out in. My background is in outsourcing. And in outsourcing, what traditionally was done was an enterprise would identify a process that was necessary, but they might have deemed less than strategic. You've got to pay your bills. You've got to onboard your employees. You've got to coordinate shipping and logistics of your products. But some of that becomes sort of this internal cost center element. And so if you can define that process well enough, you can have someone else do it. And so that's where you started to tap into a global arbitrage of teams elsewhere who just happened to be as capable, as smart, just cheaper because of where they were. And that was really the realm. And it was a good sort of candidate filter system for what was also automatable to some degree, because it was routine, it was mundane, it was transactional, digital inputs, measurable sort of expected outcomes, outputs that you could measure quality and speed and throughput and yield and everything else. And so that's where my automation came in. The point being, though, is there was different approaches to, you can automate that which you're inheriting. That was a your mess for less narrative. Or you can challenge convention and you can ask yourself, what are we really going for here? That introduces the complexity to some degree, as we want efficient bill payment, or we want outstanding customer experience, or what have you. And that's a bigger challenge. That's where more data comes in too, because you have a lot of input as to what's going well and what's not. You can continue to just sort of pave cow paths, right? Digitize the way that you've done it before, or you can get more sophisticated, which we really weren't doing a lot of 15 years ago. We started to do more of 10 years ago. More and more tools are there for us to now really challenge convention and do things differently and more interestingly today. Most people still don't, but that aside, the capabilities are there. And that's where data comes in. That's where better data science, better understanding of what it's teaching us and telling us can help us define and design better automations across an organization.
I'm going to want to revisit this kind of strategic piece. We probably still have to make it clear how the kind of automation I might be involved in, the kind of automation that you're involved in are different. So we have a couple of things. A quick comment first. I started out as an SPSS statistics trainer, back when you'd jump on a plane and fly out to a classroom, and there'd be a bunch of other people that had flown out to a classroom, which kind of seems point now. I mean, certainly we still do that with conferences, but I don't think we do that as often with training as we did 20 years ago. So SPSS, a lot of times you can do a lot of work point and click, but sometimes you can program. And I remember that I used to talk about the Post-it note test. This was just something I used to talk about in class. That sounds a lot like when you were talking about outsourcing. The notion was, you're not feeling well, you don't think you're going to be in the next day. What do you think you could delegate to a colleague? And if you got to write a book to explain what has to be done, that's not going to work. But if you could fit on a Post-it note, open this file, run this report, I really appreciate it, I'll be back on Wednesday, right? That's the kind of thing that you delegate, and you can delegate it to a colleague, you could delegate it to an outsourcing team, but ultimately you could also delegate it via automation, and that just really resonated with me. Also, I want to welcome our colleague Angela, and it prompts a question that I want to ask you, Ian, which is when you're talking about that strategic stuff about what should be automated, what should we be automating now, what's a bit more ambitious that maybe we could do 2 or 3 years from now.
Mhm.
That really sounds like it has elements of business analysis to me.
Yes. Yeah, and that's fascinating. Um, and I've just dumb luck has put me at some of the sort of the cutting edge of that evolution and discussion. Um, again, 12, 15 years ago, well, it was RPA. Still is. Like none of these go away, by the way. They're all additive. They all add to this sort of tapestry or tool set, if you will. But then it expanded to a broader tool set, intelligent automation. And that's actually, if you follow the direct trajectory of my career, but also my LinkedIn learning courses and a book I wrote and other stuff like that, RPA, then intelligent automation, which incorporated RPA, the execution capability, but then it also involved everything that our eyes, our ears, our brain, and our mouth do. So it's conversational AI, it's interpreting, it's understanding interactions, it's thinking and analyzing, so higher order. And then now, in the last few months, it seems like the world's gone crazy. AI has roared back from what was a bit of a winter, and truly is making some significant strides. Which are just mind numbing. It's just so fast. And if anyone else feels dizzy,
Revisit
yeah,
that for a bit because
yeah,
we've known each other for a while, and I'm familiar with your courses. I've enjoyed watching them. But before we get into like the smart automation, and
yeah,
first we're talking about automation. We both do it. Then we talked about how what we do is a little different, and then by the time we get to smart automation, we're kind of full circle and we're overlapping again, right?
right. Yeah.
So let's really make sure that we're pretty clear on the RPA piece. What's just specifically the RPA piece and the IE, or I've heard you say that before, but maybe you could clarify a little bit on kind of the boundaries of where
Mhm.
where RPA was a few years ago and probably still is now, and where that kind of boundary is.
Yeah, I mean, and throughout the existence of it, it's all, no boundaries are hard set boundaries. In part just because technology evolves, and so the boundaries naturally become a little foggier and fuzzier. I'll go back 10 years. So 10 years ago, in my course, my first course, I do say RPA robots are not dumb; they are just well behaved. And what I meant by that was there were scripts that you designed so that if the onboarding of a new employee meant opening up system A, grabbing data from Excel sheet B, putting it into field C, D, and E, you didn't need it to be creative. You didn't need it to be making up the next best way to do that task. In the same way that you didn't outsource all this work to some team offshore and say, I don't know, make it up as you go along. Like you guys do what feels right, right? You had a very clear process capture to then training and cascade and ramp up and go live in those teams. And it's the way that we would do it internally too. You hire a new person in your internal shared service center to do finance and accounting. You don't say like, cool, just try your best. You have procedures, and so that's where RPA excelled. It was great at executing transactional processes that were defined. Now, it was incumbent on you. I mean, again, the paved cow path thing, the incumbent on you to rethink the process itself, because this was a chance to re-engineer and improve and make more efficient, especially because robots do things a little differently. You don't need humans checking other humans to make sure we don't fat finger and make mistakes. The boundaries gotten fuzzier because there's other capabilities, right? Because there's better eyesight to these robots now. It's not just that they need numerical data in a spreadsheet. They can start to interpret. They can start to look at PDFs that are scanned and figure out where a customer number or shipping address is, which they couldn't do 10 years ago very well. And so that's sort of a complementary capability, but it all starts to glue together into a comprehensive solution. That is, how do you get this set of tasks done RPA does some of it. The eyes are getting better. It used to be called OCR, optical character recognition. Often hear intelligent document processing, IDP, as sort of the evolution of that concept. Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question. I'm going to just keep
No, I
going.
think it does, but I want
Yeah.
to pause there for a second before we kind of push or cross the boundary, because what you were describing is, well-behaved robots basically meant that there was established process and we weren't going to, detour from that process. So you could
Right.
imagine, not necessarily whether or not a claim is going to be honored, but claim processing. It's going to go to this department. It's going to be passed on to that department. This has to be double checked. You have to attach the police report, let's say, if it's a insurance claim.
Yep.
So I think for me, the name of the game is that it's deterministic. And the reason that that's a helpful word for me is that it's the word that I think best contrasts it with what I do, right?
Right.
Because I'm all about probabilities. That's why I'm brought in, right?
Yes.
In fact, if you think back to the 80s, and for the record, I was not a working professional in the 80s, but I do remember them, right? If you think back to where my side of the house was in the 80s, there were some use cases that have been with us for, forever. And it was basically trying to figure out the probability that, something would occur, let's say like a loan default, right? So you have this branching, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to have a machine learning model tell you the probability that you should take action X or take action Y, right?
Yes.
And I think when we start to get into smart automation, there's this possibility there's the claims processing, and then there's a fork in the road, and possibly the kind of thing that I work on is helping navigate that fork in the road, because what you were describing was there was no fork in the road. These are the steps. Well, sometimes there's some branching, but the point is that it's deterministic. It's not depending upon an assessment or a guess as to an outcome. Do you think that's the main thing that separates what we do?
I think it's quick before we go. Hello to Matthias and Patrick and Charles. There's some awesome questions too. We should address those. And I'll answer this one, which is yes. The realm to which I was brought in often was, again, operational. It was to get work done that was clearly defined. We experimented. We worked with certain clients, and this goes back sort of 5-10 years. Like a banking client, for instance, we were able to use some more of this deterministic technology to identify anti-money laundering situation. The challenge being the nature of that environment was highly regulated, and therefore the deterministic algorithm and nature of the solution, it would get it right that this was fraud, but it was difficult to audit, and so you didn't necessarily know why it got it right. And so again, like I said in the beginning, you're doing cooler stuff. I'm in the world of the transactional mundane. Ours was easy to audit. Some of this deterministic plays very big roles in calculating risks and in determining outcomes. In a lot of the realms that I would hang out in, it was almost too risky to depend on it, but fascinating experimentation as to how it's done. I imagine that's only expanding just because we now know. I mean, there's all sorts of weird interviews with folks about how we're just not sure why ChatGPT is coming up with the information it's coming up with, and how all of a sudden it can speak an entirely different language. That sounds hard to audit too.
Yeah, and gosh, that gets us. That's almost another show, because that gets like into explainable AI and things like that. So, to be clear, everybody, the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, gosh, we've been doing since the 80s and 90s, and things like that, things like decision trees and applying statistical techniques and things. But again, trying to come up with some probability that there's an outcome. So,
what do you think? What do you think is so? If we've been doing it since the 80s and 90s, and the capabilities are there, but the adoption isn't as widespread as the potential would suggest, is it's not a capability thing. It's a skill development thing. It's an enterprise resistance to change thing. What?
Oh yeah, it's organizational culture. I think is a huge part of it, and you reminded me about the aspect of what you were just talking about that I wanted to tie in, which is when you were talking about the money laundering.
Mhm.
I think what you were describing basically were established, well-known industry business rules, and then you were implementing a check against those business rules using RPA, if I follow, right?
We did, although some of it was tapping into the machine learning space of things too. So
Oh,
we were
cool.
expanding into more of the esoteric AI that it was harder to audit.
Yeah, so here's my answer to why I think, despite the passing of time, that so few organizations really nail it. Some do, but the minority is that sometimes they think, oh, we don't need these stodgy business rules and
Yeah.
industry standard anymore because we have AI. So we're going to throw out the business rules and replace them with machine learning. And
Uh-huh.
you'll actually encounter this, at client sites, and it's not the way to go. So if that's not the way to go, that means that the existing business rules and the existing human processes have to continue while bringing in something quite new, and
Mhm.
that's where you have a problem. What should we do? Should we trust the business rule? Should we trust the machine learning? I'm sure it'll be brief. Ian will figure out that it looks like we lost Ian for a second, but I'll sure he'll be. In fact, he's
That
already
was
back.
human error right
Yeah.
there. I just wanted to illustrate why humans shouldn't be in charge of certain transactional tasks because we
Yeah.
screw it up. So sorry,
So,
back again.
so in short, what happens? Those two worlds clash. The established processes clash with the new ones.
Mhm.
So again, a quick shout out to Angela. It sounds like business analysis to me. The established clashes with the new, and if it doesn't get resolved, it becomes contentious. This may surprise folks unless they've experienced it. If they've experienced it, they won't be surprised. Things get contentious, and then there's somebody that doesn't want that machine learning model or they don't trust it. And that's where the transparency and the other factors come in. Yeah, so it's really automation might involve machines, but its success depends completely upon adoption by humans.
Yes.
In
Oh, and it's why I love what we do as far as the coursework we put together. You've got a lot more courses and better ones than mine, but darn you. But it's all to develop a digital literacy and sort of a digital quotient within an enterprise and within their teams, because the thing that, as you said, that stands in the way is very organizational, cultural, and skill oriented and human. It has nothing to do with the technology. And by the way, I mean, in the RPA space that means a lot to me, that served me well. Success rates are atrocious. I mean, it's just embarrassing how few of these projects actually succeed or scale. Like it is insane how few do, and none of it's because of the technology, and it's because of a whole slew of other things that we don't have enough time in the day to get into in detail. But it's
our
organizational.
our colleague behind the scenes is kindly sharing our LinkedIn courses, and
Oh,
at
cool.
the moment I think I guess I do have a couple more courses, but as you know, it's a long game. I don't know how familiar everybody is. I mean, chances are there's a good chance that someone's here because they've seen one of your courses or one of mine. But the amount of support and post-production and planning that goes into those courses is really remarkable. And I'm saying this is a good thing, not a bad thing. So what would you say typically from the first moment that you talk to your content editor about an idea to the moment that it goes live? 6 months typically?
Yeah, well, it's sort of hard to know. It's just COVID threw a wrench in all that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. I did my first two courses were on site in the studios, and then my next three were all filmed at home right here with that as my background. I filmed it on myself on a camera that's over there on the table. And then I was back at the studios in December. I did three different courses, and two of them took about that. Two of them took several months. One of them I literally pitched them while I was there. I'm like, hey, you know what? Thursday's free. I think I'm going to finish in time to have a whole day free. Can I do a whole other course in it? I
That
think
is
I,
fabulous.
yeah, I think I torqued some processes, and they were very patient with me. But I've got another course that's coming out in about a month. That was that one. which was about specific use cases and applications of RPA. So stay tuned.
Are you as excited to see them? I think people underestimate how excited we are to see and watch them when they come out. I mean,
Um,
sure, we want to say, yay, our course is out, celebrate, but it's exciting to see it because post-production does such an amazing job. You would think we never had an incoherent thought, except that they've watched us have them right now. But
I don't know
watching
what
our
you're talking about.
courses, you would think that that never happens.
I do mine perfectly. Single take, right? Like it takes me about 30 minutes to record a 30-minute course. I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
Oh gosh, post-production for me takes weeks. They must love editing your courses.
No, I'm just
Uh,
kidding. But
you
no,
are
it is a
quite
lot of fun.
right to mention the really great questions we were. Let's
Yeah, we should.
scroll back and do that. I saw Patrick's, and welcome, Patrick. One of these days, I'm going to be in Brussels, and I hope we'll chat. But I haven't been traveling to Europe as much in the last couple of years. Matthias, I'm not finding this question. Do you want to take it?
Yeah, so when I kicked myself out, I lost them in the chain, but there were some good ones. This is bear with us as we deal with technical problems. Here, good one, Patrick. This is a great question, and the answer is so the outsourcing industry. This is 25 years. My career has been in outsourcing, and from day one. We were always fretting about the impending impact of automation and how it was going to cannibalize the industry, and that never happened, and didn't really feel like it was going to happen until a few weeks ago. And so, to your point, the capability of the co-element, those co-pilots, and the capability of the large language models truly create some very disruptive opportunities. Where the disruptors come from is another question. But you're right. Access to the world's knowledge through the large language models and the capability to do the things that humans do, which is listen, which is learn and depend on prior discussion, which is craft and converse in human language. That could be seriously game changing to any scope of services, but again, specifically outsourcing because of the characteristic of very measurable scopes of work that you were contracting and handing off to a team elsewhere. A lot of that made it the candidate for RPA. It makes it even a better candidate for the modern class of technologies available.
So, at the risk of putting you on the spot, but it's kind of why we're here. A year or two from now, what
Mhm.
kinds of tasks would you be recommending to companies that they route to automation, and what might still be going to outsourcing? And then we don't have to go down the rabbit hole, but I should mention that there's this whole new category now. Like when we first met, we were talking in the context of my former colleagues at Cloud Factory
Mhm.
that does data annotation. So
Yes.
you also have this something that's reminiscent of outsourcing in a way, right? But this
Yes.
large number of folks that have to label data,
Mhm.
annotate data, so that AI can more usefully do it. So that's kind of like this emerging category. So what happens to these existing categories, RPA and outsourcing?
Yeah. So again, back to our prior point, which is the mechanics and laws of physics and enterprise get in the way of full application of capabilities. What I mean by that is people resist change. BPOs have always seen struggled because they're defined by their own internal incentives. They want to sell you more seats and more people rather than cannibalize their businesses. So often they're a bad place to see true disruption. Um, the narrative that I've always focused on is there is no lack of things to do. We just do the most sort of critical, which generally is just the keeping the ship afloat nature of processes. We're just keeping the lights on. We're just doing the basic transactions. If we could create a much better experience, I mean, hell, the entire industry was predicated on net promoter score. Simply a question of would you recommend the service to someone else? Just, we slogged our way through figuring out how to set up your router, or to fix a banking issue, or to, set up a new account on a internet service provider. Would you recommend that journey to someone else? And usually no. I don't want to be on a phone with someone else trying to solve this problem. That whole thing sucks. Um, and so I think if we were able to do more of that transactional stuff with this automation, with the augmentation, we're able to apply our humans to do all of the great proactive, creative, empathetic, service-oriented things that we generally just don't even touch, because we just have no time to even think about what would be possible if we had those people free. Um,
I'm
if
glad
you'll
I'm glad
indulge
you're
me,
bringing up human empathy, because
yeah,
I want to ask you about an area that is definitely not a specialty of mine, but I imagine that you have some familiarity with, which is chatbot type stuff, not chat GPT, but in the customer service realm.
yes,
Because I hope I'm not making companies that I work with frequently, like let's say Delta or whatever. I've got status with Delta, so I actually get to a human. But I can't be the only one that on my phone has said agent, agent,
yeah,
agent.
yeah,
You know, with the amazing stuff that has been happening over the last couple of months,
yes,
are we going to possibly see a revolution in that area
I think so.
where we grow happier with automated customer interaction?
Yes, I think so. I think we, for the last 10 years of these IV intelligent voice recognition, IVR agents and chatbots and other things, we have been we've been guinea pigs to a class of technology that is in no way, shape, or form ready for the task that it was thrown at, or that it was thrown at it. You know as well as I do that those chatbots suck. The experience is terrible, and the common knowledge was always, it's not if that chatbot will fail, it's just when. When is it going to fail to address your question, and when do we have to kick it over to a human?
Why torture me for 8 minutes
Right.
and then
And
eventually
then,
let me talk to someone? Yeah.
and then cherry on the top is that the handoff is a cold one, where the person picks up the phone and goes, "So who are you? And what's your name? And what's your customer number? Why are you calling?" And you're like, "Are you effing kidding me? I just spent 8 minutes giving you all this information that is hugely mineable. You can see where I am, what my sentiment is, what the key themes are, and there was no handoff." So ultimately, it's been bad. It's about to get a heck of a lot better. Just because of the ability, and this I touch on this in my new course, conversational AI. It's got history, right? It remembers what you're talking about. It's got a far better way to interact. Anybody on this call who's played with ChatGPT, even the smallest amount, sees the level of sophistication in the back and forth that goes on. So I think it's about to get a lot better, and I think we're about to see um, those processes have to go through a lot of re-engineering, where people try to figure out where are the human elements, where are the things that we would do without these, because those bots are going to handle a lion's share of the routine and the traditional calls, just because they're just better at it now. I'll give you, I mean, if you indulge me, there was an example from 10 years ago. We were doing an automation in an HR shared services center for it was a healthcare client. They were in the healthcare industry. That's not necessarily relevant. The HR group was doing is they were processing pay when an employee of that company was out for any reason. So they were out because of sick leave or maternity leave or family medical leave, what have you. And that payment comes with insurance and state or whatever. But that team was so busy transacting those payments that they were always playing catch up. When we automated, all of a sudden they took that same team and they turned them on proactive duty. And what they would do is they'd call a nurse, in this case, who was out on maternity leave, who just to say like, "Hey, just checking in on you." Are things okay? Are you getting your pay? Is there anything else we can do? Also, we see here that you're scheduled to come back to work in, a month. So we just want to walk through with you what it is that looks like, and we'll just make sure all the systems are set up, your access cards are working again. That changed the game, right? And that was because we thought creatively about, we've handled the robotic stuff. We can have humans create better experiences for, in this case, our own employees, so employee experience. And there's only goodness that emanates from creating better employee experience. And so there's all sorts of primary and then secondary, tertiary benefits that accrue from using good automation where it makes sense, challenging the existing process to figure out what else you can and should do once you've automated the mundane, and then apply your humans to just make that experience great.
A very quick comment about automating the mundane, and then I want to shift to smart automation. And that phrase that you'll recall caught my attention. It was said partly in jest, but I think it's very descriptive of the not smart automation.
Yep.
Kind of getting at that point of intersection between us two. So I'm reminded of the old stereotype about airline ticketing. And there'd be stand-up comics would joke about this, where the type, and you'd be, can I possibly get on the 3 o'clock instead of the 1 o'clock that I'm already on? And it'd be typing for like 6 or 8 minutes. So sorry, it's a
what are
manual
you doing?
process. And of course, it's wonderful that we're getting that away from, the human labor, because that's just crazy that wasn't streamlined. I probably never really will understand what was taking so long, but it clearly isn't quite like that anymore.
Well, and if you think about the deterministic nature of it, and I don't know how much determination there is. I mean, ultimately, I would always say, like, look, I bought a flight to get me from Tampa to New York, and that flight is now canceled. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to determine what it is that I want as a customer, right? Like, I still want to get to New York, right? So there should be a series of logic tree steps that then kick off. And maybe it's that I need to get to New York by tonight because I have a meeting tomorrow. And if the next flight you can put me on is 2 days away, you don't know that in your logic. You don't know what else is in my life. So, but give me options. And that should have just been like auto, right? And yet the experience was a nightmare, and continues to be to some degree. So there's the good news is there's lots and lots of room to improve, and these technologies are enabling it. And Patrick, to your point about plugins, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be just, again, if I wasn't dizzy and just numb already, that's about to create an entire renaissance as it relates to supercharging the capabilities that are already existent in these large language models.
So could you clarify a little bit what's going on with that? Because again, our worlds are different enough that I haven't played around with those.
Yeah. So, and well, you haven't, because they haven't been available. They're literally just making them available to very, very few and sort of beta at the moment. But I see plugins of ChatGPT as like giving the brain fingers. And so you could ask ChatGPT, like, hey, like, I'm trying to figure out what's for dinner. I've got a family of 4 and we like to try to eat healthy. And, my wife is a pescatarian. Recommend a dinner tonight. And so it can do that. Its brain will go off and say, like, cool, great. Like, this is the sort of meal that makes sense. The plugins come in where you say, awesome, can you order that for me? Can you order all the ingredients for me? And then fingers are able to actually reach out and interact with Instacart, in this case, okay, is a site that has plugins. Same thing with like Kayak or Expedia, right? I'm going to Italy with my family this summer. I'd like to find hotels that are of a certain quality in these cities, recommend an itinerary. The brain was able to do that. The fingers will then be able to make it happen. And that's just 2 very, very simple examples. But yes, plugins are here. And
I have to admit that I'm sure I won't be the only one that might have some hesitation to that, because when Amazon Alexa calls to me across the room, when it always usually starts with what's my notification, right? When I find out, surprise for you, we have a special on XYZ, and I go, I wasn't really looking for a special on XYZ right now. But there was
That
that
you
brief
didn't think you
moment.
were, but it knows you better than yourself. You
I didn't think I did.
uh-huh.
What was that? What was that crazy toy that it recommended? There was a pickle or something. I remember one of your YouTube videos that
Yep,
must have
that's
been like
exactly
a buck
right.
or
Yeah,
something.
the Amazon AI algorithm recommended a yodeling pickle to me,
It
which
was
of course I bought
funny.
and created a video about.
But
So
I
pretty
can't
much
be the only one that briefly pauses and says, "Okay, I have to collect myself and say the right thing here because I don't want to accidentally order this." Right? You know,
yeah. I
so
mean,
that
it's
that
we're
that will be something that we'll have to navigate as a culture with the plugins. I want to acknowledge Angela's reminder that rental car agents also used to spend an awful lot of time typing.
yes.
Angela Wick is a fellow LinkedIn instructor. So the reason Angela's name has come up in conversation 2 or 3 times now is that business analysis definitely overlaps with all this in an interesting way for sure. Um, Oh, and what else? Oh, yeah. Patrick mentions your Intro to Conversational AI course. We still have to make the pivot to smart automation, but first, why don't you talk a little bit about that course? Was that the one that you snuck in on the Thursday?
No, no, no. The
Okay.
one I snuck in was RPA use cases. This
Oh,
one was this one was the primary reason I was there. And this is the greatest course ever recorded in the history of man. So everyone should go check it out. It literally it's better than Cats. I'd see it again and again. No, by the
so
way,
if we
Patrick.
asked ChatGPT for the best course in the history of man, will we
Very good.
immediately be taken to your?
That's the one.
Okay.
No, and so it is an exploration of what conversational means as far as, and it's funny, because if you say conversation, I think talking, right? You and I are having a conversation with our mouths and it's making noise. But in the context of conversational AI, it is any human-like interaction, right? And so that happens either with voice or it happens with typing. And so the conversational AI technologies were everything from those somewhat pervasive now bots that pop up and say like, "Hi, how can I help?" That you ignore instantly because you know they're garbage. At least they have been. They're getting better, and or the things that you do, as you said, you're talking to your Alexa or any of the other devices that listen now. The level of sophistication has gotten so much better because again, it was an FAQ before. It was like I'm trying to understand the words Ian says, and then I'm trying to relate it to the few things in my database that sound like they might be the appropriate response. Now it's just a heck of a lot better at understanding, interpreting, understanding context and then going out and stitching together much more nuanced and informed answers and holding on to the thing I said to it before. Right. And I think that's going to be game changing too, because it just you can build context as you go through a discussion. And that's where humans came into play in call centers because the IVR bots just didn't do that. So that's ultimately what we
Well,
explore in
and
conversational AI.
congrats for going through the whole process that we were describing before so promptly, to have this out there when it's on everybody's mind. That's certainly a very helpful thing. So back to smart
Did
and
you
not
did you
smart
post my
automation.
yodeling pickle link? That's
Oh yeah,
outstanding.
that worked its way into the comments.
Thank you very much. Everyone should go watch me.
So smart versus not smart automation.
Yeah. It means nothing. I mean, intelligent and smart are words that marketers have put on the front of crap since the beginning. I think it's misleading. It's I don't know what it means. I
Well,
mean,
it's what I think. Um, I think I think it's the wrong phrase too.
yeah,
Um, I think that the distinction is the distinction that we have to talk about, but I think it's going back to when I was talking about, is it a deterministic process,
right,
right?
right,
Are you applying business rules and following a path where there's no if likely to churn or if likely to default or if this is likely fraud, where this probability comes in. I think
yeah,
it's really with or without probability. Why that's smart and not smart in particular makes it sound like it's not useful, which of course it isn't the case at all.
yeah,
Um, the crazy typing we were talking about is not smart in the sense that there's no probability involved,
mhm,
right? But I agree with you. We need better phrases.
Yeah,
You're not at the ready with better phrases, are you?
because ultimately it was creating a mysticism around math,
Yeah.
right? I mean, smart and intelligent just meant it was an algorithm that computed permutations, options, the variability, and that, like, it makes it smarter than, as you say, just I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do that. Like, that's straightforward. And the if then makes it smarter, but is smarter smart? And so I think that's always been sort of a misnomer, and isn't helpful, especially again because the discussions I've had with enterprises for 15 years, where they think that, well, this one says intelligent, this one's smart. We did this with RPA. RPA as a name was around for about 15 minutes before other groups started to describe intelligent RPA.
Hmm.
And you're like, what are you doing? That's not helpful. And that name thankfully died down pretty quickly because it wasn't actually useful to inform the narrative. So
You know
yeah.
what it reminds me of, Ian, kind of in my space, is um, with all credit to the important and influential author Tom Davenport, competing on analytics and the whole thing.
Mhm.
One thing that's always driven me a little bit to distraction with the analytics maturity curve, right? Is I agree that if an organization tries to do predictions and machine learning, that they're going to benefit from that. I mean, it's been my career. Of course, I think that. But the problem is then you can go too far with that. And you can say, therefore, the higher up you are in this analytics maturity, AI, machine learning, or whatever,
Right.
has more value at the department level within the organization. You start to devalue, let's say, business intelligence, or worse, cannibalize business intelligence. Kind of like, wow, if you really want your career to take off, we need you to leave this role
Yeah.
and go, do data science and machine learning. And I think data science and machine learning is valuable, but I think business intelligence is really valuable too.
Yes.
So again, any chance that we can get a better phrase at this, it's basically, and it's automation infused with probability or not, but
Right.
that doesn't roll off the tongue.
Uh, it's hard to make a clip art meme about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, I do give robot clip art much of the credit for my success in the RPA space. It was just something you could visualize.
One
No,
might be
no
surprised
joke.
how much time you spend looking at like clip art and stock images, not because that's the critical component of developing a course, but it's part of the conversation you have with yourself to decide if you're ready to tell a story, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but hours melt away looking at
I
stock art.
I now find myself dedicating hours to Mid-Journey. That's my new favorite guilty pleasure is Midjourney. For those who don't know, is yet another one of the generative AI tools that creates pictures that you just prompt and you tell it what you want it to make, and it's so much fun.
Can
Um,
you put the generative stuff in like a keynote or a course? A little bit of a digression, but what's the copyright issues around that?
well, good one. It's you know the,
Who
the
knows,
the
right?
problem with the law is it always it has a lag behind the reality of the world in which the law currently exists, and that lag is only going to get longer and longer as the speed of innovation picks up. Right. So to your point, I think there was a story of somebody who created a picture book or something with imagery from one of these generative AI tools, and ultimately I think was sued because it was just clear that the generative AI was inspired by other art that belonged to an artist, and therefore it was deemed as that artists are close enough to it. So yeah, I mean I'm using it for random personal projects and
Yeah.
fascination, not for kicking
Then you get
off.
into the living artists and the dead artists and all kinds of things like that.
Yes.
So let's
Yeah.
let's spend a couple of minutes trying to describe for folks that maybe are more familiar with you a little bit about what folks on my side of the business do. Basically, a client will come to me. Let's say it's something like predictive maintenance, and they'll say something like, if this piece of equipment, overheats and we don't detected in time or something, we're going to lose a whole batch of product that we're making, right? And we lose like a ton of money. Now, if we turn the machine off unnecessarily and double check everything, and we're down for 15 minutes, that's not as bad, but it costs us like $5,000, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a Post-it note. This is just not, if the light goes off, then shut it down kind of a thing. This is more somebody that probably has many years, possibly decades of experience is standing next to this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment or something like that. So someone like me comes in and takes Internet of Things data or something like that and tries to come up with some kind of predictive model so that the person on the line can be told there's a better than 80% chance within the next 15 to 30 minutes that we're going to have a problem. Go ahead and apply your engineering skills, make the appropriate decision, right?
Right.
Now, really quite different than what you were talking about or in your duct tape
And those
video.
those cobots, those assistants, that's in more of a sort of an operational support and technical support realm, but they find their way in everything. Again, I spent a lot of my time in call centers. Some of the scopes of work were around sales. There are similarly cobots that basically say we would call it the royal road, which is effectively the path that led most likely to a successful outcome. In sales, it's selling somebody something. In services, it's solving the problem. And so you do that same sort of deterministic math and say, okay, based on what I'm hearing said on the call and the type of problem and whatever other variables are available to me, this is the thing you should say next. Right? This is how you should engage with. And so, yeah, I mean, I think those are hugely powerful and will continue to.
So two topics I want to try to get to in the remaining minutes, right? Now I'm going to warn you both of them so that we can try to make time for both. So
Cool.
One is who does what you and I do within the organization, right? I mean, who are the RPA specialists out there? Are they mostly external? Are they sometimes internal? So I want to get through. Well, we can start with that.
Yeah. So it depends. There are in the early days, it was anybody who was inspired, anybody who felt like their gut was telling them this is not good, this could be done a different and a better way, who became aware of the capabilities that were in the market, and then they would start these little sort of skunk work rogue pilots, proofs of concept. As the space evolved and matured, and IT figured out about all the crap you were doing in their systems, you needed to be more mature. You needed to involve IT, and often you centralized this effort. So there was centers of excellence where you had representatives and stakeholders from multiple components of the business, and it could be everything from the process areas, HR, finance, supply chain, to the technical area, to other centers of excellence, sort of shared service capabilities like continuous improvement, Six Sigma, Lean, those folks, the data scientists, those folks. And so that's who you see doing it in enterprises. Alternatively, you use experts. There's always a consultant for anything. And that was my background is a consultancy that helped enterprises understand, apply, and manage this stuff. So that's where it goes on. Again, unfortunately, enterprises struggle with clear top-down mandates from executives, underfunding, lack of measurement about what good is and what the mission and the set of stated achievements they're going for are, and then just lots of like the traditional communication failures and internal infighting and politics and fiefdoms and blah 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 that gets in the way of all of this success.
I'd say about a third of the time or more, machine learning and data science report up through IT.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out. Other ways of doing the organizational chart can include, they report up through, like finance, which is usually just because that was the first business unit to sponsor a project and it stayed there, right?
Right.
So do you find that it's still the case? I mean, you kind of implied it that RPA tends to report up through IP.
No, I think it's totally cultural dependent, right? Because it's a finance, it's relevant to finance. So sometimes it reports up to the person who's trying to tighten the purse strings and eke more out of the operations. Sometimes it's IT. but then it just sort of slots back into the IT bucket of projects. And so that was always the dissonance between business and IT, where business wanted to get stuff done and IT said, perfect, it's on the roadmap for 3 years from now. And so business went, well, screw that. We're going to just do this ourselves. And that's where these lower code, knower code technologies enabled them to take their own initiative.
In
So
my world, VP of analytics is not unusual. I mean, even chief analytics officer, right?
right.
Any equivalent
That's a great
role
question.
for RPA?
Yeah, I mean the roles of, I mean, it's amazing how quickly these things pop up and then proliferate. But there were heads of RPA, and now they're heads of intelligent automation. There are chief automation officers, chief, the CIO, CTOs still have some of it. So honestly, it depends. I've
Yeah,
seen,
but that's remarkable because again, despite some overlap between what we do,
yeah,
wasn't familiar with it. Okay, so final topic. We have just 5 minutes, so we have to be careful. AutoML is a big thing. In fact, I just
Mhm.
completed my most recent course. Actually, is an executive guide to AutoML. So it's really for leaders to understand what this can and can't do. So the whole notion is that I'm there trying to help the organization automate tasks, but then AutoML is, now we're going more meta, right? Because the idea is AutoML can automate some of the tasks that I do,
Mhm.
helping people make predictions or automate tasks.
Yeah.
Is there an equivalent in your world?
Um, it depends on who you ask. I would suggest you don't want that yet. It's not sophisticated enough to do that, because I guess in my world it's still execution. It still is. It's not analyzing to provide some potential answers and options on which to act. It's actually just doing it, and you don't want these robots just again making it up as they go along and deciding how better to do payroll, because that's
Well, yeah, and actually, I like the way you phrase that because the beginning of a machine learning project is much the same way. And no one does, the most ambitious, most optimistic AutoML vendors
yeah,
don't argue that what they're doing is automating that. So in other words, project identification and project definition is absolutely a human thing.
yeah.
What's interesting about my side of the house is that when you go to decide which model is the best at making a prediction,
Mhm.
you might have like 100 plus options. And at first that surprises folks, but you're not just doing each modeling algorithm, you're doing each modeling algorithm with different settings.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's just
Why go back to
factorial. Yeah.
people like me acting like the rental car counter, run model one, run model two, run model three, right? That's
Yep.
crazy. You loop it and you walk away and you have a nice lunch and
Come
you
back.
come back. So that can be
Yeah.
automated. But naturally, once that begins, they want to try to automate some other aspects as well.
Yes.
So that's the world I had to explore when I was
Yeah.
putting together the AutoML
Which is great.
material.
Everyone should check out Keith's courses, by the way, before before you do anything after this class, before you pass go or collect $200.
Well,
Go watch Keith's course.
I'm proud to say, and it's the second best course ever
That's
developed, right? Because there's
great.
already a stake in the ground,
Very
as of
kind of
20
you
minutes ago.
to support my egotistical and broad statement. No, I mean it is ultimately, I think the thing that you and I find derive a lot of passion from is educating and making people aware of what's available. I think that lens, that digital literacy is the first step always, whether it be in data science in the more deterministic or down in the in the trenches of just doing the routine and transactional. The thing that's holding us back is just that awareness and the lens through which to look at the world and start to challenge convention. And that's what I think, if we achieve nothing else, it's to get enterprises to think digital and to start looking at themselves and challenging the way that they currently do them.
Final thoughts. Where should folks, if they want to know more about what you're up to, um, I'm going to force you to pick only one. Which of your courses do you think would be the best place for them to start?
Um, Watch the intelligent automation one, because it speaks to the broad spectrum of all the technologies that they need a framework
Okay, so
around.
they'd get the whole umbrella,
Yeah,
and then if they want to dive deeper on intro to RPA, they can do so, but start with
yeah.
intelligent automation. Okay.
Because ultimately, man, those URLs are sexy, huh? Look at that.
Yeah.
But because again, on the journey of making yourself a worker of the future and the future of work, you owe it to yourself to understand the tools and open your aperture. That and other courses like it doesn't have to be that one. Make you aware of what's available, and then I guarantee it makes you look at your world in new way. I mean, one of our guests who's on, maybe he's still on, Abraham, who mentioned a few different ways this could apply to recruiting and to nurse staffing. Perfect example is somebody
Mm.
who's subject matter expert, knows his field, took a look at some of this technology, and again, it's that lens epiphany thing of this is hugely applicable to the world I know so well, and it makes me sort of think even in more creatively about what the art of the possible is. That's that's what everyone should do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Abraham, for your question. Final thought from me would be if you want to understand the machine learning side, if I had to pick one course, obviously I'm proud of the one that just came out, the AutoML one, but I would recommend Predictive Analytics Essentials Data Mining. I know the data mining phrase is a little out of fashion, but it's basically what we've been talking about. It's building these predictive models. So
Is it for anybody? I mean, that sounds analytics sounds intimidating, but
no, I really think that one's for anybody.
good.
I
Yeah,
will say this though. I did do a version of it that's a little different and a little shorter for specifically for executives.
interesting.
And I wouldn't have thought to say that actually. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, I
No,
mean,
but what
and
it
I
really
think
is,
it's
it's about the
required.
machine learning life cycle. And that's why I really think it's there for everybody. Because you could go in knowing nothing about predictive analytics and nothing about machine learning.
Yeah.
And maybe you only stick with me long enough to get to the first step where you choose relevant, appropriate projects, and you've already benefited. So I definitely do think it's for anybody.
That's right. And couldn't recommend that more strongly. And again, it gives you the lens, it gives you the digital literacy that is imperative to anyone in any job or still in school about to start their career. This set of technology, this set of capabilities and skills is the future.
Oh, and if somebody's in school, I mean, gosh, the amazing learning paths that are on in the LinkedIn library are really tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, a huge topic, so we've really just made a dent. I don't know. I don't know how well we connected all the dots, but we arrayed the dots out on the desk, and we got the conversation started.
That's right. Thank you to Whirlpool for sponsoring us. And
And to the manufacturers of the yodeling pickle.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
For those of you who wish pickles yodeled more often, check out the yodeling pickle. Now,
yeah.
this is awesome, Keith. Thanks a million for having me
You're
crash
very
your office
welcome.
hours. This is fun, and we should do this
And
more often.
And thanks to our colleague, Megan, who's provided links for nearly everything that we mentioned, which is so helpful because clearly
Absolutely.
I don't have the attention span to do everything that I have to do in that as well. So thanks
And
so
I
much.
fully logged out, so clearly I'm not the guy to be handling anything technical. So thank you, Megan,
Okay.
for all your help.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Take
care.
care.